Ladies and gentlemen, gays and girls, I read the books but you told me to! Hello, if you're new, my name is Emma, I'm a complet grad and film student. So I read Circe recently as like part of a book club thing, and then the amount of borderline spamming messages you guys have sent me going, read Song of Achilles, read Song of Achilles! I did it. So I've read both of them. I don't think I've ever done a video where I've sat down specifically to talk about like one or two books. I've not really done that. If you would like me to, say if there are specific books you would like me to talk about. I'm very good with like classics, as you will know if you've watched my bookshelf tour or have seen anything that I buy in any of the book hauls. Like, when did this become a book channel, honestly? You'd think this would have happened during my undergrad, but it didn't. It's happening now. So if there are any book things you would like, let me know. I will do an intro to classics. Classic literature, not just like classics. These are the first two books by Madeline Miller. She's done classics, I believe, at Brown. These are good. I'm just gonna say off the bat, I really enjoyed both of them. I actually don't know which one I enjoyed more. I don't. I really enjoyed both of them. I really like classics. All of like Greek, Romans, all of that shit. Fucking love the Iliad. Still haven't technically read the Odyssey, but I do know what happens in it. We had like a child's version of the Odyssey, which I read, we have pictures in it, which I read so many times as a kid, which is fucking great. If I can find a link to that book, I will. Like if you guys have kids, or like maybe even like donate it to a primary school library or whatever, it's really good. So I've kind of grown up with these stories in a way, like a lot of them have been like the back of my mind for a very long time, but my god, it's just so good. Song of Achilles is based on the Iliad. This is more based on the Odyssey. If you guys want recommendations for translations, I know my brother really rates the Robert Fagles translations. They're still like in sort of a bit more verse. And then my copies I have, where is it? Well, my copy of the Iliad is the prose translation by, my copy of the Iliad is broken. Translation by Evie Ryu? Mew? There is this Mew joke with a cat that I sent my mum. I will see if I can find it. It's classics related. This one I rate really highly. I really enjoyed it. And you know what warms my heart more than anything? When I get messages from 16-year-old girls whose icon is like a Snapchat filter with the dog being like, I bought the Iliad and the Odyssey because of you. I'm like, that is fucking sick. You have been influenced, and this is kind of influenced her. I would like to be. I really like these books, but now let me tell you specifically why, and I like them for very different reasons. We'll start with Circe. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's so shiny. So first of all, I used to think this was called Circe. It's not. It's Circe. I'm dyslexic. Circe is classically, she's the first witch. She's one of the first witches. I didn't really know anything about her other than in the context of the Odyssey, she is the one who turns Odysseus and his men into pigs, which I still think is fitting. But I like it as a retelling, I do. And like, genuinely, classics is such fair game to like tell it and tell it again and tell it again, because there's so much debate as it is about whether Homer is one person or a group of people, and like if you read it, it's, you know, it's an oral tradition. If you look at the colour of these, this is love. This is very well loved. I think my brothers have both nicked that copy at one point or another. But these are very well loved stories and very well known stories. So like, yeah, it's fair game. Anything to do with like myths or anything that is like an oral tradition, if it's come from an oral tradition, every time it's told, it's going to be told differently, right? Even if it's a little bit. So things like this, really good. So on that concept, I really like both of these, just even as an idea. I will admit, the first moments that I was reading it, the first like few pages, I was like, this feels like reading fan fiction. To an extent, it's a similar concept, right? You take a pre-existing like world and like people with all their rules and stuff, and you're like, ah, my turn. I feel like once I got past that and like got to appreciate her writing, felt like it's obviously significantly better than a lot of the fan fictions. Not all. I may have re-downloaded Wattpad fairly recently, but it is still very well written. Like, okay, there are maybe one or two fan fictions I think are better written, but this is still good. And I do feel like it is fair to compare it to fan fiction. Some of you may disagree, but that's just where I stand on it. Gods are so petty. Gods are so fucking petty, and like that is the most entertaining thing ever. And it's so nice to see that distilled into both of these books. Like, you get a sense of how just like childish they are. That was kind of always the they've always been like that. It's like so much less of like that grandiose kind of like worship. It's more like, oh fuck, what have we done now? Okay, who do we need to calm down? Who's pissed off with us? For what reason? Why is there no wind? For reference, this is probably going to be full of spoilers. But then also, it's classics. You should kind of like, I feel like you can't give spoilers for like the Odyssey and the Iliad. You know, like, I feel like this is one of these stories where everyone is, you know what happens. You know what happens at the end. So yeah, Circe is the first witch, and she keeps transforming people. And therefore the gods are like, goodbye, and banish her to an island. And it's like her interactions like with her family dynamic and dealing with like power especially. You guys know women in power is like one of my favourite things to think and talk about. Wait for it. Mary Beard, Women in Power. Mary Beard is a classicist. If you don't know, I highly rate following her on Twitter, she's quite funny. But I use this book a lot in my dissertation, and obviously she's a classicist, so she talks a lot about women in power in a modern context and then also in a classical context. If you want some extra reading, definitely read this, definitely read the Iliad, definitely read the Odyssey, and definitely read this. I think the main overtones of this were like loneliness and grief. Song of Achilles definitely has grief in it too, but I feel like they're very different kinds of grief. For this, there is so much about just being alone and how long eternity is actually supposed to be. The fact that if you're not surrounded then by like other gods who will also live forever, you very, very much are on your own. And even if you find love and like, because basically she falls in love with Odysseus, has a child with Odysseus. Her child is still mortal, her lover is still mortal. Circe knows there's nothing she can ever do in a way because they will die, and she won't. I know there is like a lot of grief obviously in Song of Achilles. Spoilers, Achilles dies. We all knew that. But it's a different kind. That is such like passionate, fiery grief. This is just sort of like that acceptance. Like, Circe has always known, in a way, that everyone and everything she loves that is mortal will die, and she doesn't like any of the other gods. That's kind of the point. They like just banished her and she's like, okay, cool. Thank you. And also I guess about like moving on in a way, and like how even the immortal people that she does love, or like once did, will eventually change, and like given enough time, people change so much that you don't know them anymore. And that they become people that you just, even if they don't physically die, the person that you once knew is very, very much gone, even if they're still in that same physical body as they always were. But if you don't know, I annotate all of my copies. And I always put my like main themes. She has themes. Here. One of them is gay, 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 gay. So I really, at the end of this, my only like qualm with this really was, so her son Telegonus causes Odysseus' death, which then forces Penelope and Telemachus to her island, basically seek refuge with her. My qualm with that, her and Penelope didn't live happily ever after as cottagecore lesbians. A shame, honestly, and like if you're gonna rewrite shit, you may as well kind of go for it. But I feel like it takes you through a lot of the myths. You get a lot of context in terms of how Circe meets like Jason and the Argonauts. You get stories about Hector, you get stories about the Iliad, you get all of those connected myths, and like it's such a sort of nice world in that way to then like be into, because you're like, oh, I don't know much about this, and then I kept Wikipediaing different people being like, oh, and their story and their story and their story. Chunks of it are set within this like Age of Heroes, because as you learn, for Circe, like 10 years, like the 10 years of the Trojan War, it doesn't really, it's like nothing to her. She's a god. And there are these sections where you skip over like 100 years so quickly, and you're like, fuck, it went in a blink of an eye. That, I guess in a way, is how it feels to her. I'm like, fuck, that just sucks. I guess also in a way of like how easy it is to like waste your time away if you're not really doing that much. So like you can kind of understand why the gods get petty, like they want something to do, let's go cause a war or something. How about my favourite can steal someone's wife? That's fine, it's not gonna launch 1,000 ships or anything. And I guess about like if you're manipulating people for your own entertainment, like fuck. Which is then why Circe sort of presents a more balanced sort of front almost. Like she has her moments of petty, she has her moments of like, I'm a god, fuck you. But so much of it is like rooted in guilt and regret. And I think it's almost like every time she just regrets the fact that she falls in love with someone who, first of all, was never hers. Odysseus was never going to be hers. And in the context of this writing, like she's not hostage or anything. It's that knowing that no matter what time you have, it will end, and like trying to accept that, but then also like it still hurts, you know, when you have to like let someone go that you do love just because you know it's never meant to be. Which, like, we've all been there, right? When you've like loved someone, but no matter how much you love them, you know that you're not endgame and that you have to eventually let them go, and like that hurts sometimes more than like if something had like gone wrong in a relationship where you're like, okay, cool, fuck you. No, like letting go of people that you actually love is like probably the hard, like, and for their own good, it's probably one of the harder things you have to do. She does get her son out of this, but then also that you can't protect people forever. And that you can fight destiny though. You can. Because they do, like, even though the gods are like, oh, this is gonna happen, the prophecies and fates are always a bit like wishy-washy, let's say. And you can't cheat them, but it doesn't always have to go as planned. Even for us, maybe what the takeaway is that like don't worry about what plans you have. Things can change, and sometimes that's a good thing. And that whether we like it or not, sometimes we want to pretend that we're not in charge of our own destinies, because then you can get away with like going with the flow and like being passive in your own life. Like, no, fuck, internalize that main character syndrome. You do you, like, you go out and you get what you want and you go after the things that you love, and like, yeah, even sometimes if you do, you might have them for a moment, and maybe in the end that's not the best thing, or may not even be the most important thing that you got out of the thing that you once wanted. For example, with Circe, yeah, she wanted Odysseus, and knew she could have him, but at the very least, not the very least, she got her son out of it. And I'd argue a lot as well that it's about creating your own family. All of Circe's family, all of the gods are just fucking dicks. They are so petty and cruel and mean. And about surrounding yourself with people and things you love and things that make you happy to fulfill that. Just build your own family. Like, blood isn't everything. Some of the strongest love you will have will not be with people you're related with. I just feel sorry almost for Circe that she doesn't have more friends, which is then why you can understand why she put so much onto the fact that she finally has like Odysseus. And I think it also reminded me a lot of like on her island. Yeah, I've been saying it like that. I used to describe the whole like Cicero quote of like, if you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. Where is Cicero? Cicero is on my other pile. I bought some Cicero recently. And I guess in a way that's kind of like, Circe on her island is almost just the ultimate cottagecore fantasy, isn't it? She lives off the land, she's self-sufficient, she doesn't need to be bothered by anybody if she doesn't want to be. But I guess also to an extent, she gets bored. I mean, after a few hundred years, you probably would too. Would you then also start turning rapey men into pigs? Yeah, probably also. The way that this retelling works is you actually really end up empathizing with her, and you're like, yeah, honestly, everything that led you up to make the decisions that you did when she's met in the Odyssey, from Odysseus' point of view, you're like, oh no, this kind of makes sense though. I probably would have done the same, especially if you're spending your entire time being a fucking witch. So I think it is a lot about like motherhood as well, and like making your own families, and like how divinity sucks. And I guess maybe that's in a way of like celeb culture. Like, if we think about it, you can make it allegorical for that. Do you want to be worshipped? Do you want to be feared? Do you want to in that way live forever? Is that necessarily something we all should want and subscribe to? Maybe that's a capitalist culture thing. Maybe it's the fact that we've replaced having specific gods like the Greeks and the Romans did to having specific celebrities that we basically worship for, in a way, similar reasons. Like, if you think about the cult of Athena, if you think about the cult of Aphrodite, to an extent, is being a fan of something like One Direction kind of a cult? Because the more I think about it, the more it kind of is. Like, you do very much go and you very much worship them. So maybe that speaks to an innate need in us socially, that whether it's a god, whether it's gods, or whether it's celebrities, that we need something that we regard as better than us to then worship. I guess almost the fun thing about having celebrities is they are real people and they do fall, and then that perverse enjoyment of watching like a celebrity get dragged through the mud. Could you kind of maybe argue that with gods? Potentially. And the one thing that also gets me about this is how many times Circe refers to herself as silly. I feel like that's something we use so often in the context of women. Oh, you're a silly woman, stupid, you like stupid cow, you silly bitch, like you dumb bitch. That is a rhetoric you use so much about women, and like every time I read Circe saying that about herself, I was like, no! Because she's a character that genuinely believes she's stupid, and she genuinely takes so much longer for her to understand her power. Like, that's the whole point, right? Her siblings all understand they have this kind of witchcraft, this power that they can like build and grow, and Circe is a one person that takes the longest because she doesn't see what she's capable of. I think that rings very, very true in a 21st century retelling. I think women are still at a point where they do still need to be empowered, and you need to realise, no, you're not silly. Yes, what you're saying does make sense. You don't need to mitigate. You don't need to be almost apologetic for when you know something or when you can do something. And you don't have to make yourself any smaller in order to like be accommodating. Like, what is it with the compulsive desire we have to be accommodating? And I think Circe then does sort of personify that in terms of like when all the nymphs get sent to her, when people arrive, like, okay, there's like being a good hostess, but then there's also just like, yeah, that compulsive need to like be good almost. So I think we could all do with finding our inner Circe. As a woman, you should almost try harder to find that inner power that you have in whatever way it manifests itself. It would be great if it was witchcraft. I mean, I could definitely do with a good dose of that. Just channel your inner abilities. Go fuck shit up. Why the hell not? But yeah, I think this is very much an escapist fantasy too. We would all like to go live on an island and have some lions and like, you know, not be bothered by men unless you are gonna turn them into pigs. Is that where that comes from? Is that the whole men are pigs thing comes from? I mean, there can be many reasons, but I quite find that an interesting one if I'm completely honest. And we love morally complex characters, and we love, especially heroes. It's something, I am the first to admit that I am so in love with Odysseus. Like, I always imagine him as Russell Crowe. I can't not. I don't know why, but it's that thing of like, it's this age of heroes and like how we often glorify men for like their power and their strength and whatever, and then when you see them age and like Odysseus has like PTSD in this, you know, how he feels like, you know, this immense responsibility for the people he's supposed to be protecting, is supposed to be leading. So I guess making them more complex and giving them those like real feelings, it's nice. And it's like, oh yeah, I know that these people mythologically represent things, but then if you try and see them as human, you're like, oh fuck, yeah, that makes so much more sense. The fact that Odysseus stays as long on Circe's island as he does is kind of like that respite of like being away from the rest of the world. He's finally got a moment of peace. He doesn't have to return to the real world in a way which is like what, somewhere between his life that he's just had in Troy for 10 years and then his life back on Ithaca. But I really think the end of it and like how Odysseus dies, it's so fucking sad. Can you imagine the guilt of a child as well when you're like, I just wanted to go meet my dad and then I accidentally killed him. But then also like, what's Circe's drive to protect him, Telegonus, but then realising what in the end you will always have to set your children free. If you don't, all you're going to do is suffocate them more and more. But the way that Odysseus then goes home and he becomes kind of cruel, a bit more bloodthirsty, I feel like it does make sense. Fucking sucks though. You just want to keep him as a hero, but like you can't, because people aren't always like that. People are both good and bad. Some people are really good and some people are really bad in the same person at the same time. And that sometimes our memories of them choose the best bits. Sometimes people are much, much better than we remember them, and sometimes people are much, much worse. So yeah, I don't always trust your memories on people, but fuck. Odysseus' death is so fucking sad. Oh, I'm so in love with him. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoy it as a 21st century feminist retelling, and I do recommend it. However, I would read, if I were you, Song of Achilles. I would read this first. This happens before Circe. Before like the main bits of Circe. Circe happens the entire time. Song of Achilles, oh my god. Okay, one of the reasons I didn't buy it for as long as I did was because I wanted like a similar edition to this one. What am I specific about editions? We have no idea. This I very much like. These are both Bloomsbury editions. And I'm just a hoe for like this isn't a matching set per se, but I really prefer it like this. These are both Bloomsbury. I cried. I cried a significant amount at the end of this because I forgot about Patroclus. It literally tells me how to say it in this. Patroclus. I forgot that he dies. I forgot. Like, okay, I read the Iliad, what, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago? I forgot that he dies. Obviously, you know that Achilles dies. Everyone fucking knows that. I know that Hector dies. Everyone fucking dies. But my god, I forgot. So I was reading the end of it, just being like, wait, because this is written from the point of view of Patroclus. So like, the end bit where he, That was kind of, everyone was like, by the way, it'll be devastating. Yeah, everyone was like, fucking, that was an understatement. Oh my god. Song of Achilles is obviously set in the Age of Heroes. It is about Achilles and Patroclus growing up, and then as they get like scouted to go to Troy, and then their time at Troy. They spend 10 years in Troy. I forget it's that long. So obviously Paris steals Helen because Aphrodite's being a bitch, and then Menelaus and Agamemnon are like, cool, 1,000 ships, let's go fucking get her back from Troy, which is like Anatolia, so what's like Turkey, I think. So I think it's a really interesting thing to have told it from Patroclus' like point of view. You really can see this, like he's a little bit omnipotent in that kind of way. You know, I love a good backstory. Watching them grow from like kids into then like teenagers and young adults, because they don't get much further than young adults. It's just, it's so nice, and like seeing that like love grow. In Circe, this is much more of like a mature, grown-up adult love, and it's very like accepting, and it doesn't, it sounds bad, but I feel like it doesn't burn as bright. This is much more, I guess, for love is kind of like a slow burn. It's that kind of, yeah, that grown-up love where you're just older and you see more of the world and you're less naive and you're like a little bit more jaded and like less idealistic. This is like falling in love as a fucking teenager. It's passionate and it's fiery and it's all or nothing. Fuck. Being a teenager and being in love is the most all or nothing love that you can have. And part of me is starting to believe that you don't get that anymore as you grow up and you're an adult. Objectively, this kind of love is better. It's more stable and it's more understanding and it's significantly more forgiving, and it's just something that you have a marriage on this kind of love. This, it burns incredibly bright and it burns incredibly hot, but it burns out. And in their case, it's snuffed out. Fuck. So Patroclus is Achilles' companion, friend, close personal friend, depending on which century of historians you ask. Patroclus is Achilles' lover. Gay? Everyone was like, oh, is that the gay porn one? I'm like, no, there's really not that much in here, if I'm honest. Like, I guess I came into these both with more of a fanfiction mindset, so I was kind of reading it going, where the fuck's my smut? Like, where is it? There's really not that much, unfortunately. So if you want to read it for that, you might actually have to read fanfiction or just watch porn, but like maybe just read fanfiction. So that's like not why you should read this. But god, the kind of love that this is just like, it really is that teenage kind of love. So if you want to recapture some of that feeling, if you're starting to get older. There was a fucking TikTok that I saw that was like, if you're like old on this app, you know, born in the 90s, and I was personally offended. It's weird to feel that I've already kind of like lost that kind of like intensity, but maybe it's also reassuring. They fight and they're petty and they make silly mistakes, but like they really do love each other more than anything. And I guess maybe in a way, because they both know that it's not gonna last forever, that they do make the most of it. I wonder if they hadn't been lovers, that maybe Achilles would have been more balls to the wall and would have gone after Hector faster, because like, why not? Is that one of the reasons the war dragged on? Probably. Definitely. But when you read the Iliad, like, god, Achilles is such a little bitch. Achilles is such a whingy little bitch. And that does translate very well into this. I feel like some of his little, like, being a baby stuff is like, it makes more sense to me now than it did when I read that. But like, had Achilles not been so proud, Patroclus wouldn't have died. Like, they just, or maybe not in the way that it happened, like it just wouldn't have. The way that then pride can really ruin so much. Do you care more about yourself and then like your image and like what is owed to you more than you actually care about, like you care more about your honor and all of the like superfluous, more abstract things, rather than like the actual physical things in front of you being, you know, the people that you're supposed to be fighting for and supposed to be helping to defend. You care less about the person dying than you do about like, you know, your myth and your legend. Like really the last 100 pages of this are a wild, wild fucking ride. I kind of wish though in this there was more input from like from the gods, because obviously when you read the Iliad, like they are messing in everything. I would like to have seen more of that in this. Obviously you got a lot from Thetis, which is Achilles' mother, and how she's a fucking bitch. I didn't like gather that she was that much of a bitch from like the Iliad. Is that Liberty's Madeline Miller is taken? I don't know, I don't really remember. But I do wish there were more gods in it. But then there's a lot of gods in Circe, so like I feel like when you read them together, that does make sense and that does work. Yeah, this is very much about love as passion and love as pain, and like what it is to love someone more than you love yourself. And I think Achilles did, and Achilles had good intentions, but I think because he was, you know, what, best of the Greeks, like he had a role to fulfill that was greater than himself, that made him less, and obviously because he was, you know, he is a demigod, so like the bit of him that's not human almost compromised the bit that is, in terms of his emotions and his feelings, and the fact that, yeah, I guess he cared more about being his legacy and his like godliness, I guess, than about the man who was trying to do everything to preserve his legacy, I guess in a way fulfill the prophecy in the way that it's the best possible way that it can be fulfilled, all things considered. I think Patroclus is very much a lesson in selfless love, the same way I guess that Penelope waiting for Odysseus is, to an extent. He doesn't just give his life for Achilles, for Achilles' legacy. He doesn't just do that. He does it for the fact that these people that he knows are dying, and he knows that Achilles can help, but Achilles just is too petty and just is too much of a little bitch. In the end, Patroclus is like the best of their men, like Rhesides says. And there's actually a bit where she's like, where Patroclus has died and she's like ripping into him. You have never deserved him, you don't know why he ever loved you, you only cared for yourself. That's the thing to say to a man who just lost his boyfriend. Yeah, and it's like about the different ways that you love someone, like whether it's unrequited in her case, or very passionately but ultimately selfishly like Achilles, or loving someone completely selflessly to the point of stupidity like Patroclus does. But the end, the ending is fucking heartbreaking. Like I've said, this entire thing is full of spoilers if you haven't gathered already. Patroclus dies. He dies at Hector's hands, which then obviously spurs the last bits of the Iliad, where Achilles then goes on a fucking death raging rampage, and finally gets Hector and like drags his body around a bit, because that's a mature thing to do. But it's just like the ghosts, it's just like who narrates the last bit then as a ghost, and like that wishing for his soul to be at rest, and like having to witness his own death, and more like what the grief people feel is often worse than like you dying. The feeling that maybe being left behind is actually worse than dying. And in Patroclus' case, he almost gets left behind twice. Like, you're dead, and then your ghost doesn't get to fucking go anywhere? Fear of eternity. The same way that, like, yeah, with Circe, you're like, fuck, that shit is lonely as hell. Hopefully not going to hell, but you know. I like the idea of an underworld. Does it ever really say if it's good or bad? You're just dead. It's heartbreaking. And Thetis has fucking hated him the entire fucking time. The entire time. And I guess after Pyrrhus, little shit, genuinely, I have never read a worse character in my entire life. And how the fact that he just like almost destroys his father's legacy, like how his kid knows nothing about his father, and how what Thetis has tried to mould him in almost a better man, in her opinion, than Achilles, but then fucks it up because, like, where is the humanity? I would argue that the humanity isn't necessarily written into the Iliad. But then with this, she can create more complex characters, so she does explore that side to it. So Patroclus is almost not given a named grave, which means he would like not get to go back to the underworld, not get to see Achilles, and have to be stuck in Troy on his own forever. They're just reading it like, no, no, no. It's that sense of impending doom where you're just like, this isn't happening, this isn't happening. The worst has already happened, you think. But no, the concept that he might be left there forever on his own is horrifying. And like, if you think about like Christian mythology, if you think about like a lot of religions now, you have an afterlife, you have a good or a bad one, but you're not on your own. You're never on your own. The whole point is that you're not on your own. Like, who the fuck wants an eternity if you have to spend it on your own? I think that's shown so well in Circe, who then in the end chooses that she doesn't want that eternity at all. A life well lived is better than 100 lives are half-assed. I think maybe a lot of us would almost, in a similar vein, have like one great love than like a lot of half-assed ones. Go hard or go home. That's the message from this. But yeah, when Thetis eventually does, you know, in a way, set Patroclus free, I cried so much. I cried so much at the last lines, guys. In the darkness, two shadows reaching through the hopeless, heavy dusk. Their hands meet and light spills in a flood, like 100 golden urns pouring out the sun. I'm gonna cry again. No, I'm not! Ah! I finished this like 2 days ago. How does this end? This ends then with the funeral rites of Hector. Swift-footed Achilles. Yeah, I don't understand where any of the Achilles heel stuff comes in, because I swear that's not how anyone dies. But some bits are exactly the same, so I wouldn't read necessarily the Iliad and Song of Achilles or Circe and the Odyssey like back to back. I wouldn't probably do that, leave like a little while in between. I feel like added context just because I spent more time with the story, I guess, and from a different perspective. So in the Iliad you get a lot more of like the politics between the gods, and I kind of wish that was in Song of Achilles. What's this? Thank you, Louis. You left a gross coffee-stained bit of paper in my copy of the Iliad from when you were reading it. Thanks, bro. Ew. Where's the index? When does Patroclus die? Also, this is a great edition to study from because it basically all says it out. It tells you which bits are which. Agamemnon, Achilles, breezes. Oh yeah, they keep getting women as war prizes, and then Patroclus is always like, take her. They're not going to become bed slaves in their camp, so you know. The girls and the gays sticking together since Age of Heroes. That was a mature thing to draw into my book. Wait, I swear I have more. I love Hector, by the way, as a character. I had a lot of fun. But yeah, this book broke my heart. And I needed a good cry. And has reminded me that love is a thing and I'm not emotionally numb to it. I need to stop being a little bitch about that. You'll find someone to love as much as this, hopefully one day. But maybe not to the catastrophic level. That would be nice. Please let me know how you thought about this. Please let me know how you thought about this. Please don't shy away from classics. If you have ever been interested in it and want to get into it, just honestly read these. Do it, why the fuck not? And then leave it like a year, I don't know. Read the Iliad, read the Odyssey, I don't know what my copy is, as we know. Which yes, the irony of that is not lost on me. But I've said this so many times on my channel in so many different ways. Whether you're reading classics, what I can only assume will become modern classics, it is not pretentious. I know that if you think a lot about like classics, you're like, oh, Latin, Greek, Oxbridge, how like private school and stuffy. I know, but it's really entertaining. And the gods are petty, and it is not this incredibly inaccessible highbrow thing. And honestly, I think Miller's books are a testament to that, and I am very, very happy that these exist and that they are so popular as well. It's so much of this like, you know, sexy drama. Like, that's what it is. Like, why do you think these stories have been told and retold and continue to be in circulation thousands of years after they were maybe first spoken into existence? These are stories that are so, like, just in a way telling of who we are as people. Whether it's about those, like, I hate the word universal, you know, but whether it is those, like, very human feelings of love or grief or loneliness or passion. It's about what makes us who we are as people. And then it's just put against the backdrop, such as, you know, the Trojan War or the Odyssey, but like it's very much about who we are as people and what it means about when we are together in societies, no matter what kind of society that you find yourself in. I think they are stories that speak very much to our humanity or lack thereof. So please never ever think that it's too complicated or that you're too young or whatever. These are incredible stories and I cannot ever recommend them enough. And I will read other retellings of the Odyssey and the Iliad because that shit's good, dudes. There's so much material there. I think that is what I have to say about that. I recommend. And yeah, also read Women in Power. That's good too. Do I have any other classics related things to share with you? I always want to call it Ostrictia, but it's not. The Oresteia, after Clytemnestra, you know, goes and fucking murders Agamemnon because he sacrificed their first daughter. Fair enough. This like Age of Heroes shit is so dense and there's so many good stories. You know, it's like a myth. There's always a moral of a story if you want one. Also, the bit with the horse doesn't happen in this. It doesn't happen in any of these. It happens in the Aeneid. In the Aeneid. It happens in this. So like, I'm always confused about how, I don't know why. It's another one. Oh no. And there's also Ovid, if you want. I will read this, I haven't read it. There's also Ovid, which is more the Romans. It's the same set of gods, really, kind of. It's all canon, let's say. It's all canon. Greco-Roman myths. And there we have it, kids. Those are my thoughts on those two books. Please, please read classics. Like, it's not, just do it. It's just books like any other, but it comes in, unfortunately, slightly pretentious wrapping paper. Unless you're a slut for dark academia, then this is your fucking jam, my kids. You have some more reading to do. I will leave these in the description. You can follow me on Goodreads, which I will link. Oh no. Read classics. It's not pretentious. Just the way that it's taught is. If you have any book recommendations for me, let me know, of course. Any book videos you want to see or other videos. This isn't a book channel. She protests. But yeah, thank you very, very much for watching. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. And I'll see you guys hopefully very soon. Bye. That's enough main character syndrome for the rest of the day.